So the government has promised to overhaul part of the asylum system as it aims to quell the anti-migrant protests that continued across the country over this last weekend.
Well, that comes as Reform UK leader Nigel Farage is set to announce his own plans, including mass deportations and new detention centres. Joining us now is Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook. Good morning to you.
Morning.
We had Reform UK's Zia Youssef on earlier. He was laying out the plans for what Reform have in mind. Viewers getting in touch, and a lot of them seem to welcome what they heard. Shelley, thank goodness for this man, bring on a Reform government. Kathleen, at last, someone saying what the English think. Another person, Zia Youssef, knocking it out the park, get the illegals out. You not being tough enough on immigration is pushing people towards reform, isn't it?
No, we're taking the practical, hard-headed, admittedly unglamorous steps that are required to bring this global challenge under order. What Reform are announcing today, from the details that I can see, the scant details that are available, is not a serious plan. Now, and so while I appreciate that people across the country are frustrated, they want to see order restored to the immigration and asylum system, they want to see the small boat crossings reduced and brought to an end ultimately. There's not a serious plan. We can discuss specific points of it, but one of the core elements of the plan, as I understand it, is that Reform are pledged to come in and negotiate returns agreements with countries across the world like Afghanistan, Eritrea, Sudan and Iran. And I just say to your viewers who are listening, who have engaged with what Reform have said this morning, what happens if Afghanistan don't agree to a returns agreement? Where do the planes go? Or if they do agree, how much are we going to be paying them for the privilege?
Well, yeah,
what do we do with a country like
financial incentive to either send them back there or to another country?
And what happens if those returns agreements aren't negotiated? Because this Labour government have negotiated return agreements, including a groundbreaking pilot scheme with France. We want to secure more. But the idea, frankly, that Nigel Farage and the circus that are Reform come in and negotiate returns agreements that are operable with some of the most hostile regimes in the world, I think, frankly, is for the birds.
Do you see my point, though, that actually, you know, people at home who are worried about the situation and they see the statistics, record numbers crossing in small boats, 28,076 so far this year, and the Labour government not doing enough to tackle that?
But we are doing enough, and so while I do understand and appreciate why people are frustrated,
do you think you're doing enough?
That it is taking time to turn around the broken immigration and asylum system that we inherited. We are taking the necessary measures to bring this challenge under control. It won't happen overnight. We've been very honest about that, but we are making tangible progress. We've deported over 35,000 individuals who have no right to be here. That's a 12% increase year on year. We've got that groundbreaking agreement with the French. We've seen asylum seekers already detained under that scheme. We'll see removals to France in the coming weeks. And some parts of our plan, aren't even enforced.
You've already lost the public trust on this issue, haven't you? If you look at the statistic on the housing situation, 71% of people believing the Prime Minister is handling the asylum hotel issue badly, and that includes over 50% of Labour voters.
No, but let me say again, I appreciate why communities across the country feel frustrated at the pace of change. But this isn't a problem we were going to solve overnight. It's not a problem that any party could solve overnight. That's why the unworkable gimmicks being pushed by Reform don't stack up, because it is a difficult problem. The gangs are entrenched as a result of many, many years of policy failure. But we are turning things around. We're seeing tangible results. And as I've said, parts of our plan are not even enforced. The Borders Bill, for example, is still going through Parliament. The French are still reviewing their laws so they can take more proactive enforcement action in shallow waters. So it will take some time, but we're making progress and people will start to see the results. And ultimately, we will be judged at the next election as to whether we've succeeded or not in ending the use of hotels for asylum accommodation and tackling the small boats challenge. But we're absolutely confident we can do so.
The earlier part of that statement is absolutely true. You certainly will be judged on that, and all the polls show that. Let's just go back in time to our interview earlier today with Mr. Youssef, the spokesman for Reform UK here this morning. This is one of his and his party's core arguments.
The fact is, we have had for too long now decades of governments who have been willing to prioritise the rights of foreign citizens over our own. And yes, and that's why Nigel said, when he's Prime Minister, he cannot be held accountable for the actions of despotic regimes across the world. He will be held accountable and should be held accountable for the safety and the interests of British people.
You see, the problem you have with public opinion is that the normally tolerant and patient people of this country, it's clear from the messages coming through to this programme, to letters to newspapers, etc., and you acknowledge this, they've basically had enough. They've basically said, however unrealistic you think their expectations are, enough is enough. And therefore, when Mr Farage says something which he said to the Times newspaper in his interview at the weekend to tee up the speech he's making in an hour or so, when it was put to him that people could be sent back under his policy now to a regime that could execute them or torture them, he basically shrugged and said, so what? Not my problem. And that has not caused a howl of protest from the majority of people in this country. They've nodded at it.
But respectfully, Richard, I think in some ways that's beside the point. I'm trying to get you and your viewers to engage with the practical challenges of agreeing a returns agreement with a regime like the Taliban. To secure such a returns agreement that is operable, either taxpayers are going to shell out huge amounts of money, but what happens to reforms plan in a scenario where the Taliban do not agree to such a returns agreement? Where do the planes go? And these are the sorts of questions that reform needs to be challenged on, because they get away too often with stirring anger, whipping up problems and sentiment out there with no practical answers, and they need to start being held accountable for them.
I can assure you he was robustly challenged on all of those points here earlier.
Did he explain where the planes go if they can't secure an agreement?
Yes, he had arguments, but I'm not going to make them for him. But he did have replies, but he was challenged rigorously on that. Look, let's play fair to you. In the minute and a half or so left, the reason you're here is you want to talk about unclogging, unsticking the planning laws in this country to get more new homes built more quickly. Just explain what the policy is on that.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, you and your viewers will know that we're taking steps to overhaul the planning system. We're making significant investment in land, infrastructure and social and affordable housing. We allocated £39 billion to social and affordable housing in this spending review. But one of the quickest ways to boost housing supply in the short term is to target those large-scale developments across the country which already have planning permission, but which for a variety of reasons have either stalled or are simply not building out as fast as they could be, and to put support in place to get those schemes going. And unlocking and accelerating house building on such sites is precisely what our New Homes Accelerator has been doing over the past 12 months. We estimate that as a result, we've unlocked nearly 100,000 homes. And today we're announcing 6 new large sites in Guildford, Aylesbury, Wigan, Somerset and 2 London boroughs that will receive support through the accelerator. We estimate that will unlock another 12,000 homes, both for private market sale, but also for rent in terms of those affordable sub-market, affordable rented tenures. Okay. And that will make a significant contribution on top of that 100,000 to our ambitious Plan for Change target of building 1.5 million new homes in this Parliament.
Well, OK, just a quick one, sorry. You know, on the subject of housing, was it inadvisable of Angela Rayner to buy a further home when, you know, the big message from the Labour government is to people, don't buy second homes, councils are being encouraged not to. I know that you've been saying that as well. Isn't it hypocritical?
No, we're not saying. I don't think there's a story here, and I'll tell you the reason why. At no point have we said that people can't or should not own second homes. What we do recognise is that in certain rural, coastal and some urban communities,
you're warning about the impact
excessive concentrations of second homes and short-term lets are having an impact. We want to give councils the tools to properly manage that. It includes a council tax premium. Brighton and Hove in that area
popular
where the
seaside resort.
They have chosen to implement that council tax premium, and the Deputy Prime Minister, of course, will pay it in full.
But isn't it a bit hypocritical then if you're encouraging people to think about the impact of second homes in places like that, for her to then buy a home like that?
No, because we're not saying that people can't own those properties, but we do recognise that excessive concentrations of second homes and short-term lets do have an impact on local communities. We're giving councils the powers to manage those, and where they introduce a council tax premium to manage numbers, it will have an impact. We're already seeing that, and the funds raised as a result. But the DPM has done nothing wrong here. She's paying that council tax premium in full. And there really is no story, I have to say, other than the fact that Angela Rayner clearly lives rent-free in the minds of the shadow cabinet.
Well, you say that as a politician, that there's no story. I can promise you as a journalist, It is a story. But anyway, thank you very much indeed for your time
Thank you.
and that
Thank you
answer.
both.